Hello everyone and welcome to the video. Today we're gonna be doing something very exciting. Have you ever wondered which draft mode is the greatest of all time in all of card games? Hearthstone versus Magic? Well, today we're gonna solve the debate together by analyzing everything regarding the draft modes and figure out which one is truly the greatest of all time. Now there are gonna be 4 criteria I'm gonna be using when ranking them, 2 of which are gonna reward up to 2 points and the other 2 are gonna reward up to 1 point. Alright, that being said, let's get into it because I'm very excited about it. Now drafting is the first thing you gotta do when you play that mode, and obviously the most important one because it builds your whole deck. Now both games have some positive and negative sides to the drafting, but one thing we gotta point out, drafting at its core essentially means building your deck from scratch and figuring out your strategy as you go with the random picks, right? That's what it revolves around, and that's the most important idea there. Make sure to remember that. Now let's start with Hearthstone, and the first thing you're gonna notice is that you get a guaranteed legendary the moment you start, in a bundle also with a couple of other cards. So technically you do get a couple of cards that support that win condition or style of playing if you choose to go with something like a quest. But if it's more of a generic legendary that just does a couple of great things in general, it's probably gonna give you just quote-unquote good cards for the archetype or for the strategy or something revolving around that. It's a little weird to explain it because there are multiple examples, but that's the main idea. Now what that does is 2 things. First of all, it increases the power level of your deck immediately because you get a pretty powerful legendary that will most likely define the rest of your deck the majority of times, while also giving you a very clear direction what you want to do with your deck and how you want to build it from there. Even if you get a very specific card, you're able to build a deck revolving around it because obviously you get it from the first pick and you know what to pick afterwards. Now even though that sounds like a very good idea, that is where the 2 problems come into place. First problem is the fact that you basically revolve your deck around the random legendary you end up getting, so it really depends on which legendary you got during the start of your run against what your opponent got during the start of their run. That can easily turn into a very high rolling gameplay experience because whatever you got can define your deck, and sometimes some of the legendaries can be absolutely broken and absurdly overpowered. There are examples of cards that give you clear advantage over the opponent the moment you play them, or if it's a quest it even starts in your opening hand, or if it's a starting of the game effect it can even be more broken than that, so that clearly isn't fun. Now the second issue comes with the fact that you barely even play a draft mode, quote unquote. You no longer have to figure out what to do with your deck the moment you pick up the cards, right? You already have a very clear direction the moment you pick your legendary, unless your legendary is barely impactful, but most legendaries are gonna be pretty impactful and you're gonna have a clear direction how you want to build the deck. Now in terms of Magic's draft, things are a bit different there. You start by opening 3 different packs and you pick cards from them, some of which are gonna be rares and mythic rares, but the majority are gonna be low rarity cards, and you have no clear idea how you want to build your deck. Even if you pick up like a mythic rare, it doesn't guarantee you're gonna be able to build your deck around it. It's a lot more difficult to figure out what the deck is supposed to do, and you can combine different colors in the process of picking cards, so it can become very difficult and complicated to actually build a good deck, which I actually enjoy very much because it gives a clear advantage to a skilled player, which is supposed to be the case, right? If you're good at the game, you have an advantage. And the other important difference is that the majority of your cards in Magic are gonna be less powerful in terms of power level because they are commons and uncommons, and unlike Hearthstone, these cards are not that power crept and they're also very situational some of the time, so they're not gonna be as impactful and game changing, which will ultimately create a slower paced gameplay, but I'm gonna talk about that in a little bit. There is also one thing I didn't mention. Both of the games have one feature that the other one doesn't. Hearthstone allows you to improve your deck the moment you lose a game because it gives you options to switch up to 5 cards in your deck, and also on the second loss you will get a guaranteed second legendary to work with that can give you a pretty impactful win condition or at least a nice bonus for the deck. And also Magic has a different feature allowing you to keep the cards you end up drafting, and that is why something called rare drafting exists in Magic, where you pick up the most important cards that are the highest rarity just to get them for your collection, although I wouldn't suggest you do that because that might affect your wins during the draft mode itself. Now one thing I want to point out is that there are different ways of drafting. You can end up drafting against other 7 players simultaneously, which is also a thing, or you can even play in the best of 3 format, but for now we're gonna go over the quick draft because it's the most notable one. Obviously having more variety is very nice, but we're gonna talk about that in the gameplay because it's more important there. But yeah, those are the main things revolving around the draft modes, and you might say that one is better than another, but I really don't think that's the case. I feel like both of them are equally as good, simply because some people might enjoy having a more clear direction when building their deck revolving around a particular card or cards, while others would prefer to go and roll with the flow and just do whatever they can with the deck. So even though I personally prefer Magic, I'm gonna go with 1 point for each of them because I feel like that's the most honest way and objective way to do it. Now the next part is gonna be revolving around the gameplay, and there are 2 criteria, both of which are gonna reward 2 points because that's what you're gonna do for 99% of the time, of course. The first criteria is enjoyment and the second one is balancing, both of which are really important. Now enjoyment moment is very subjective, so I'm gonna try to be as objective as possible, and I'm not gonna discuss the core gameplay mechanics of the game itself, because obviously if you're playing the draft mode, you are playing the other modes and just grinding until you get to the draft mode, so it makes no sense for someone not to enjoy the gameplay itself. Now I'm firstly gonna start with Magic, and the best way to explain what fun means in the game, it's essentially a very strategic back and forth slower pace experience where you try to predict your opponent and outsmart them and think ahead of the game, while also paying attention to your lands and the mana system so you have enough mana to do whatever you'd like and ultimately score the win with little but very important decision you're gonna make throughout the game. So I'd say it's the more strategic game out of the two because you have a lot more to think about, and in general you're gonna have to play in a very strategic manner. And also the other thing that it's worth pointing out is that randomness is not gonna be very often seen. The randomness primarily comes from your starting hand and also whatever you end up drawing, which is normal for every card game of course. The rest of the game will go in a pretty straightforward way because you don't have the ability to generate cards randomly like Hearthstone does. Depending on the player, some people might think this is better or worse, but objectively speaking, the majority of your games are gonna go in a similar style, which means it's gonna be a little less fun if you think about it. Now Hearthstone on the other hand is known to be one of the craziest games that can continuously generate a bunch of random things from nowhere and decide games the majority of times because of that as well. A lot of your games can be decided based off of luck, and sometimes it feels amazing, sometimes it feels horrible. It really depends on which side of the coin you are. Whether it's gonna be a good or bad experience depends on the luck, but we can all agree that this would be a little more fun because we experience different things. Now Magic however has one bonus compared to Hearthstone, and that is the fact you can play different formats during drafting, all of which are really fun options. However, we gotta also point out that the quick draft is the cheapest one and the one that's more worth it for your gold because the other ones are very risky options. For that reason, both games get 1.5 points each, while Hearthstone gets a little less because sometimes it doesn't feel fun at all losing to RNG, while Magic gets a little less simply because it can be a little bit repetitive and boring at times. Now the second part for the gameplay is gonna be balancing, and here's where things get really interesting and really bad for Hearthstone. Now the main problem I have with balancing is the fact that you get a little too overpowered cards for Arena, and I think they should remove them because they're just too broken, right? And to be honest, Arena sometimes can feel like you're playing a semi-constructed format with the amount of quests and things you can get. Even if you don't get rid of every legendary, can you give me one reason why quests exist in the Arena? That makes zero sense. Quests are not supposed to be played in a draft mode. This is way too much. Now Magic on the other hand, in terms of balancing in the draft mode, is in a great spot at the moment simply because mythic rares and rares aren't as important and impactful compared to legendaries in Hearthstone. So that means the game is gonna revolve around a more strategic back and forth experience, and the person who has better knowledge regarding the basic mechanics of the game will end up having the upper hand. For that reason, I'm gonna go with 0.5 points for Hearthstone, which is the bare minimum, and 2 points for Magic, which is the maximum amount. I know it's very harsh, but it's very important for the game to be balanced, and Hearthstone just isn't balanced at all. And the final criteria we're gonna go over is gonna be rewards, which is also important at the end of the day, and there are two differences here. First difference is that Hearthstone can go up to 12 wins, while Magic can go up to 6 or 7 wins depending on the format you choose to play in. And the second difference comes with the rewards themselves. For Hearthstone, you're able to get gold, packs, and tower tickets, and if you manage to hit 12 wins, you can get the ultimate reward, which is the Shaman Hero. Now with Magic, things are a little different. First of all, you get all of the cards you ended up drafting, which is very good. That gives you a couple of nice rares and mythic rares right there. Also, you get gems and packs depending on how many wins you get, and gems are the premium currency in the game, which means you're able to convert your gold into gems, which is extremely important. That can allow you to buy the mythic pass without spending any money, which is the most important thing in the game. Now one benefit with Hearthstone is the fact that you can re-enter if you get enough wins because of the resources. However, I ultimately believe that Magic gives you a more valuable reward because it's giving you the premium currency. For that reason, I'm gonna give 1 point to Magic and 0.5 to Hearthstone. So that pretty much wraps it up. Now you know which draft mode is the best, and I tried to be as objective as humanly possible. If you don't agree with something, and I'm sure someone will, let me know in the comments below. Also, feel free to check out more content in the channel, and I will see you guys in the next video. Have a great day.